Today, we are cracking open one of the most notorious books ever written, Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince. It's a book that, even 500 years later, still has the power to shock people.
And let's just dive right in with a quote that gets straight to the point. This is Machiavelli's brutally honest view of people. He believed that if you want to understand power, you first have to get what really drives people. And in his mind, it's not love, it's not loyalty. Nope, it's self-interest, plain and simple.
So, to really get The Prince, you've got to understand the guy who wrote it and the absolutely desperate spot he was in. You see, this wasn't some philosophical essay written from an ivory tower. This was basically a Hail Mary. Imagine this. For years, Machiavelli was a big deal, a respected senior diplomat in Florence. Then, boom, in 1512, his whole world gets turned upside down. The powerful Medici family storms back into power, and Machiavelli is immediately out. He's accused of conspiracy, he's tortured, and he's exiled. So it's from that rock bottom, just 1 year later, that he writes The Prince. You can almost see it as this incredibly high-stakes job application, dedicated to the very people who just destroyed his life.
But it wasn't just about getting his job back. Machiavelli was looking around at the world he lived in, and it was a total mess. Italy was this chaotic patchwork of little city-states that were always at war with each other, and they were constantly getting pushed around by bigger foreign powers like France and Spain. He truly believed that the only way to fix it was for a strong, decisive, and even ruthless leader to step up and unite the country.
And this is where we get to his most revolutionary idea. I mean, this was a real game changer. He basically took centuries of political philosophy that was all based on ideals and morality, and he just tossed it right out the window. He wanted to focus on the world as it actually is.
For him, this was the central truth of politics. All those old advice books for kings were filled with these noble ideas about being virtuous and just. Machiavelli saw them as, well, useless fantasies. He insisted that if you actually want to rule successfully, you have to base your actions on the harsh, messy reality of how people actually behave, not how you wish they'd behave. And man, his assessment of human nature was not pretty. He basically said that people at their core are ungrateful, they're fickle, and they're liars. They might act all virtuous when things are going great, but as soon as there's trouble, their own self-interest is going to win out every single time. A leader who pretends that's not true, he warned, is just setting themselves up to fail.
So, once you accept that dark view of humanity, his most famous and infamous advice starts to make a chilling kind of sense. You can think of it as a practical, if shocking, toolkit for how to survive in a political world where everybody is out for themselves.
All right, let's tackle the big one. The question everyone knows from this book. What's a better foundation for your power? Making people love you or making them fear you?
Now, his logic here is just ice cold. He says, look, ideally, you'd be both, but since that's pretty tough to pull off, it is much, much safer to be feared. Why? Because love is basically a promise, and since people are self-interested, they'll break that promise anytime it's good for them. But fear is based on the threat of punishment, and that, in his view, is a motivator that never, ever fails. But, and this is a huge but that a lot of people miss, he is not saying you should be a tyrant. He draws a really sharp line between being feared and being hated. Fear keeps people in line, it maintains order. Hatred, on the other hand, is what inspires people to rise up and overthrow you.
So how do you walk that tightrope? How do you stay feared but not hated? Well, his advice is actually super specific and practical. It really just boils down to two main rules. Don't take people's stuff and don't mess with their families. Respect those boundaries, and people will fear your power without hating you as a person.
Machiavelli argued that just relying on laws is naive. Since men aren't always good, laws aren't always going to be enough to keep them in check. So, a successful ruler has to learn how to fight like an animal when the situation calls for it.
And to do that, he says a prince has to be two beasts in one, the lion and the fox. The lion represents brute force. He can scare off the wolves, right? But he's not clever enough to see a trap. The fox, on the other hand, is all about cunning. He can spot those traps a mile away, but he's not strong enough to fight off the wolves. And here's the key takeaway. You need to be both. Using just one or the other is a recipe for disaster. And this whole be a fox idea leads to maybe his most shocking piece of advice. A ruler shouldn't keep his promises if it's not in his best interest. And his logic is cynical, but simple.
If everyone else is untrustworthy, you can't be the only one playing by the rules. You'll get crushed.
He even argues that cruelty can be a tool if it's used well. What on earth does that mean? It means you get all the necessary dirty work done in one single swift stroke. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. A quick, decisive action to secure your power is better than dragging it out with little acts of violence that just build up resentment. Then, once it's done, you can switch gears and start handing out benefits to win the people over.
But even the perfect prince, the ultimate lion and fox combo, has one opponent they can never fully outsmart or overpower: Lady Fortune.
Machiavelli wasn't a fatalist, though. He didn't think we were just puppets of fate. He kind of breaks it down like this. Fortune, or just plain luck, might control about half of what happens to us. But the other 50%? That's on us. That's our skill, our guts, our ability to adapt, what he called virtue.
He had this incredible analogy for it. He said fortune is like a raging river. You can't stop it from flooding. But when the weather's calm and the river is low, a smart leader gets to work building dams and levees. That way, when the flood does come, you're ready for it and you can manage the damage. In other words, preparation is your best weapon against bad luck.
So, because of all this cold, calculated advice, this idea of separating what actually works from what we think of as moral, Machiavelli's name pretty much became an insult.
And just like that, the word Machiavellian was born. For centuries, it's been the go-to word to describe anyone who is scheming, cunning, and willing to do whatever it takes to get and keep power, no matter the moral cost.
And this, really, is why this book still gets under our skin today. It shines a bright, uncomfortable light on the often brutal logic of power. It forces you to ask a really tough question. To create a safe and stable society, does a leader sometimes have to do things that we, as regular people, would call evil?
Which leaves us with the big question that people have been fighting over for 500 years. Is The Prince just an evil book, a recipe for tyranny? Or is it a stone-cold, realistic survival guide for a world that has always been, and probably always will be, a dangerous and unpredictable place? The debate is definitely not over.